Welcome to the Safety in Numbers podcast. I'm your hostess, Sheila Hansen. AI and the Planet of the Apes. I recently read the book, The Planet of the Apes, just out of curiosity. This book was written in 1963 and is a really fun take on human versus animal intelligence. There are some spoilers in this video, but I'm not going to spoil the ending, and I'll just tell you this. The book does not end the same way the movies do. The apes were first trained as servants for humans and for entertainment in things like circuses, because they could mimic human behavior very well. Humans themselves, because they outsourced everything to the apes that they didn't want to do, they became generally lazy and became more lazy, and they did less and less activity, and they found satisfaction in basically nothing. They lost the ability to find satisfaction in work and in doing things that are difficult. The more the apes mimicked human tasks and innovation, the more intelligent they appeared. However, with humans doing less and less and becoming and finding satisfaction in less and less, they also innovated less and less. And eventually they lost all creativity, and over thousands of years, this is in the book, over thousands of years, they lost all signs of intelligence. They stopped innovating, they stopped creating, and they just survived. Thus, the apes were the only source of intelligence on the planet. However, ape intelligence was only based off of mimicking human intelligence. And when the humans stopped innovating, apes no longer had an intelligence to mimic. And they didn't have intelligence of their own, only the ability to mimic. Thus, the society became very stagnant. As I read further and further in this book, it got me to thinking about AI and how much we outsource our thinking, or some people do, outsource their thinking to AI. And the less you do for yourself, the less you're able to do for yourself. So for instance, if you have a child and you do everything for that child learns to do nothing on their own. I think I've told this story before, that I had a friend who, her and her husband worked as youth ministers in a church, and they had a child, and the teenagers saw her pregnancy and everything, and then when the baby was born, they loved to hold it and carry it around. Well, the kid gets to be almost 2 years old and isn't walking. You know why? Because he never had to walk. He was always carried wherever he went. And so because that was done for him, he had no need to develop that skill. And in order to get this kid to walk, they had to leave him in the floor and let him cry, because that's the only way that he would actually find it in himself that he wanted to walk. So, eventually it took a little bit of screaming and crying that he pulled himself up and started walking, because he needed to develop that skill. Nobody was doing it for him. So AI is a tool. Just like a calculator is a tool. A calculator is a form of an artificial intelligence. It doesn't actually think, though. It only does what it's programmed to do. And if you type in the wrong numbers or the wrong sign, or you hit the wrong button, it's not going to give you the answer that you desire. It'll give you what you programmed it to give you. So if you meant to say 32 minus 12, and you put 32 plus 12, it's going to give you what 32 plus 12 is. And you might look at it and go, that's not what I expected. But if you're not paying attention, and if you're not thinking, you might just go, oh, the answer is 44. But it's not. So a calculator doesn't think for you. It only does what you tell it to do. It only sort of mimics intelligence, because it's been programmed by a human to do these functions. Even the written word is a tool. It conveys a meaning to communicate between people, between other human beings. I read somewhere that when the written word became more common, there was a fear of it among intellectual types that people would lose their ability to remember facts, to remember history. I think that's kind of true because as I read about ancient times, like ancient Hebrew children were taught to memorize Torah, and the Torah is 5 books they memorized. I struggle to memorize a few verses these days. So I do think that there is some relevance, some truth to that. And as we keep outsourcing our skills to machines or to computers or to tools, we do lose those abilities. There are some abilities that we gain, like things go faster, that things are more efficient. And when you have things working more efficient, you can do more things because you don't have to spend as much time on this task. So I'm not saying innovation is bad, but there is an exchange. So when we lose an ability, this could be a good exchange for what we get in replacement of that ability. But it also might not be. So the real question here is, what is intelligence? And can it really be artificial? Well, I've read a lot and listened to a lot of podcasts on this, and I have my own thoughts. So here's basically what I've gleaned as far as an educational standpoint. You have 2 different things. You have facts and knowledge, and then you have the ability to take facts and knowledge and innovate and create and design things from that. So here's, for instance, 1 + 1 = 2 is a fact. That's a level 1, lowest level of processing called recall, meaning I can remember that 1 + 1 is 2. If that's as high as I can get on that functioning, then I can say no more other than 1 + 1 is 2. But if I have the ability to take that fact of 1 + 1 is 2 and innovate and create and design, it might become something like this. If one person goes to help another person, you have 2 people working to solve a problem. You have twice the brain power, twice the experience, and twice the ideas. I wonder what would happen if 1 more was added. That's more of a 4+ level of higher level processing, synthesis and forward thinking that just takes a fact and pushes it to the next level. What's the biggest difference here? Well, from a math perspective, lower level recall is just mimicking what you've been taught. It's memorization. There is very valuable use in memorization. As if you've watched any of my other stuff, it's important that you have memorized and that your students have memorized those basic facts. That's extremely important because you can't innovate if you don't have the facts. Artificial intelligence, therefore, looks like something that is creating or designing. However, nothing that it gives you is new. It takes what it gleans from facts on the internet and puts together a response that it did not create or design. So I consider intelligence the ability to take facts and innovate and create and design with them. AI and the classroom. In my experience, it's like introducing a calculator to a student who does not understand computation first. They may get the correct answer, but they may get the incorrect answer due to incorrect input into the calculator. And the student won't know the difference if they don't understand basic calculation first, which is why when you first teach a child how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, you use objects. You put 2 things together and you see 1 and 1 make 2. And that way when they figure things out, they can start to build on that. And as their adding skills increase and their other computation skills increase so that the numbers are large and those mental computations might be too taxing, then they can use a calculator and figure out, oh, you know what? 3,724 minus 1,256 is, and if you get a higher number than that, they're going to be like, that doesn't make any sense because they're thinking. If they put it in and like they accidentally add instead of subtract, and they get a higher number and they're not thinking, they'll just use that number, which is why you have to teach the basic calculations first. Humans are generally lazy. If there is an easy way, we take it. The consequences of using the easy way all the time is atrophy, never coming to an appreciation of all that goes into a task. I've been studying how to read ancient Greek, and I had no idea the importance of diagramming sentences until I needed it to take apart a sentence written in Greek and translate it into English. Now, as I read my Bible, I'm grateful, very grateful, for those people who put so much time and study into doing those translations and diagramming those sentences and figuring out the deeper meaning, the meaning that was meant in the text. I think that AI is great for helping students practice concepts. For instance, iExcel is an internet-based practice website, and it's great for helping students hone their skills because it has an intelligence in that if a student gets a question wrong, it gives them more questions like that. If it gets them all right, then they get to the end faster and they progress faster. That is an exceptionally awesome way of using artificial intelligence to teach for the practice aspect. Artificial intelligence is not great for teaching concepts and use of facts and knowledge. For instance, online teaching, online school that has no teacher, only videos of a human being pointing to a board or writing stuff down, but there's no interaction between teacher and student. I have been tutoring for a while, and I've had several students that were in online schools that were like that. There was no actual teacher. You could email the teacher, but emailing and writing your thoughts down, especially mathematically, can be really challenging, especially if you're a student who's just learning something. And that became extremely difficult for them to do. So then they call me and they hire me to come and teach with them, to teach the class, because there's interaction between me and the student. They can ask a question, I can see what they're writing, I can find out where their misunderstanding is and help them to figure it out. That's teaching the concept. Another thought about AI in the classroom is that if you don't use it, you lose it. You've heard that saying before. So have you ever had a broken bone and had to wear a cast? Or had surgery and had to not use your knee for 3 weeks? Thinking and memory and forming conjectures and conclusions is very much like that. If you don't use it regularly, if you're not challenged regularly in what you think and believe, and you don't solve problems, deep problems, difficult problems on a regular basis, you kind of lose that ability, or it diminishes. And so that when problems come up, you kind of stand like a deer in the headlights, at least for a while, until you wrestle with that problem for a bit. And it can come back. But if you've never been taught it, then you have to build it. Thus, when problems come your way, it takes a while to reinvigorate your ability to solve and to innovate. My last thoughts on AI in the classroom. I don't hate AI and I don't fear AI. It's literally artificial, so thus it's not a threat. I do, however, fear that teachers and students will use it in ways that will diminish their own intelligence and creativity to their detriment. So it's like any tool. If you learn to use it properly for the right jobs, it's great. It's kind of like cursive handwriting, if you think about it, which has diminished fine motor skills and the lack of good handwriting in students, because my last probably close to 10 years of teaching, students had never been taught cursive handwriting. And you wouldn't have thought that would have had a consequence in a 7th grade math class. But it did, because the ability for students to write in legibly was awful. It became a fairly common thing for me to hand a page of homework back and say, I'm sorry, you're going to need to redo this. I cannot understand what you've written here. And a lot of times they would look at it and go, I have no idea what I wrote there either. And they'd have to do it again because I can't give them credit for something that I can't read. But that ability to write in cursive, like the use of cursive handwriting, I can understand that that's not quite as useful as it used to be. But when you learn it, the skills that go into moving your pencil in those ways had tied to all sorts of connections and thinking and in fine motor skills. Those students and teachers who continue to use their own minds and develop their own intelligence will not need AI for anything other than menial tasks and searches. Here's another thing I'm thinking about here. Another thing that is kind of going by the wayside is teaching kids how to read an analog clock. Now, at the district that I was in, you learn how to read a clock when you're like in 2nd and 3rd grade. But in the district I was in, 4th grade through 6th grade was in a different building, and there were no analog clocks. It was all digital time that was set by a computer in the office, so that way all the time was the same. So there's use in having everybody's clock the same, but they learned how to tell time on an analog clock, and then they never used the skill. So by the time they got to middle school, the middle school was an older school, and all the clocks were analog clocks. And they would look at it and go, I don't know what time it is. So I started teaching them how to tell time using 2nd grade worksheets. Some of them could remember, some of them it came back very quickly, and others of them they struggled with it. But not teaching analog time diminished the understanding of passage of time. So when you see that hand moving along, you understand that time is going by. In a digital clock, the numbers change, but you don't really see spatially anything moving. So their understanding of the passage of time and how much time has gone by was diminished. And also their understanding of the multiples of 5 and the multiples of 15 and the multiples of 20. And also the multiples, the thought of 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after an hour. Those skills, so the ability to quickly add and subtract or multiply those numbers came naturally to me because I'm used to looking at things on a clock. They weren't able to do it. I do think it's important as math teachers to build in class time for creative problem solving, to develop the ability to think outside of the box and to generate ideas without the use of anything other than their own mind. I used to do the Fun Friday that I've talked about before. Take away the calculator and see how well they add. Do they understand the concept of adding, or do they just follow an algorithm? Conceptual understandings of adding, conceptual adding is much faster than trying to do the algorithm of adding the ones place, carry the one, and adding from the front end. I call it conceptual adding because if you are counting money, so if I have an amount of money in this hand and I'm going to add an amount of money in this hand, I'm not going to start with the pennies. I'm going to start with the largest denomination of bill that there is there, and I'm going to add that first because it's easier. You can do it in your head much faster. And oftentimes in my tutoring, that's how I teach it. And the kids pick it up, especially if they're young. They pick it up pretty quickly without an algorithm, just with thinking in their head. FYI, I don't believe in aliens either. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in class.